300 men, no distress call, no wreckage, not one body in more than a century. In March 1918, a United States Navy ship 542 feet long, longer than a 50-story building laid on its side, sailed out of Barbados into calm seas on a routine run to Baltimore. She was never seen again. It remains to this day the largest single loss of life in the history of the U.S. Navy outside of combat. And when the Navy closed its investigation, it wrote a sentence into the file that no Navy ever wants to write. It called the loss the most baffling mystery in the annals of the Navy. This is the story of the USS Cyclops, and at the center of it stands one of the strangest captains ever to hold an American command. The Atlantic in the spring of 1918 was not an empty ocean. It was a crowded, heavily patrolled wartime corridor, swarming with Allied destroyers, merchant vessels, and lookouts scanning the horizon for German U-boats. Yet, on the busy route between the West Indies and the Chesapeake Bay, a 542-foot steel collier simply ceased to exist. When the Cyclops failed to arrive in Baltimore on March 13th, the Navy launched a massive 90-day rescue effort, scouring the shipping lanes with every available scout ship and aircraft. They found nothing. No oil slick, no floating life rings, no splintered wood. The ocean had swallowed 306 lives and thousands of tons of steel in absolute silence, leaving behind a void that official investigators could neither explain nor contain. It remains the ultimate ghost ship of the modern era, a tragedy measured not in myth, but in the cold silence of the official record. Lieutenant Commander George Worley was not his birth name. He was born Johann Friedrich Wichmann in Hanover, Prussia, changing his name only after immigrating to America and entering the Naval Auxiliary Service. At the height of the Great War, this German heritage bred immediate, festering distrust among his crew and superiors. But the suspicion that clung to Worley was forged by more than his origins. He was an erratic, deeply troubling commander who ruled his ship through fear and bizarre, unpredictable behavior. Officers and sailors remembered a captain who paced the wooden decks of the massive collier wearing nothing but long underwear, a bowler hat, and carrying a cane. Far more dangerous than his eccentric wardrobe was his violent temperament. Logged grievances detailed a pattern of heavy drinking, explosive rages, and arbitrary, brutal punishments. These were not merely shipboard rumors. A prior Navy inquiry formally investigated these crew complaints and found substantial truth in the allegations of intoxication and brutality. In peacetime, such findings would have stripped him of his command. However, an acute wartime shortage of experienced captains forced the Navy to keep him at sea. They chose to overlook his history of rage, leaving a paranoid, unstable commander in absolute control of the service's largest collier and the 306 lives aboard. The USS Cyclops was a massive steel vessel, measuring 542 feet from bow to stern. One of 4 sister ships in the Proteus class, she was designed specifically as a fleet collier to carry loose, low-density coal. But in early 1918, her mission changed. Instead of coal, she was loaded with nearly 11,000 tons of dense manganese ore, a critical raw material for wartime steel production. This cargo behaved entirely differently than the ship's designed payload. Manganese ore is roughly 1.5 times as dense as coal. Rather than filling the cargo spaces to stabilize the vessel, it settled in concentrated, heavy piles at the very bottom of the holds, leaving vast, empty voids above it. This concentrated weight exerted massive tank-top pressure and put immense structural stress on a hull frame that relied heavily on a single longitudinal bulkhead for strength. This physical strain was quickly compounded by a major mechanical failure. Shortly after departing Rio de Janeiro, the crew discovered a cracked cylinder in the starboard engine. Although engineers recommended immediate stationary repairs, the Navy ordered the vessel to proceed home regardless. Operating on a single engine cut her propulsion in half. This reduced her speed and severely compromised her rudder authority. She had no reserve power to fight her way out of a sudden storm, nor could she generate the forward speed needed to damp heavy rolls. Sluggish, overloaded, and structurally overtaxed, the massive collier turned northward into the open ocean, her ability to counteract the sea dangerously degraded. The USS Cyclops slipped out of Rio de Janeiro on February 15, 1918, limping northward on a single working engine. 3 days later, she paused briefly at Bahia to collect mail and a handful of sailors from the USS Raleigh before steering toward the open Atlantic. Her official destination was Baltimore, but Captain Worley soon made an unscheduled detour, anchoring in Carlisle Bay, Barbados. He claimed the vessel required emergency coal and provisions. This unexpected layover immediately troubled the American consul in Bridgetown, Brockholst Livingston. To an experienced observer, the stop made little sense. Worse still was the physical appearance of the ship itself. Wallowing in the harbor, the steel collier sat dangerously low in the water, her load line nearly submerged with a distinct, unsettling list. Livingston grew so alarmed by her appearance that he sent a warning to Washington, fearing her heavy manganese cargo had been stowed in a way she could not survive. Among the 306 souls on board was a diverse human cargo. It included Alfred Gottschalk, the returning American consul general to Rio, a group of transferred naval personnel, and, deep in the brig, military prisoners, including a convicted murderer. On March 4, 1918, the overloaded collier weighed anchor and slowly steamed out of Barbados. No one on shore would ever see her again. The Atlantic was calm as the Cyclops turned north, leaving Barbados behind in clear spring weather. She was scheduled to tie up at the Baltimore docks on March 13th. When that date passed without word, the Navy initially assumed a routine delay. Perhaps her single working engine had failed, or her wireless radio was down. But as days grew into weeks with no signal, silence became an emergency. A search operation commenced, deploying scout ships and patrol planes to sweep the shipping lanes. Rescuers systematically checked secluded Caribbean bays, isolated islands, and known coastal anchorages. They found absolutely nothing. There were no drifting lifeboats, no floating ring buoys, no oil slicks, and not a single piece of splintered debris. 306 men had vanished into a perfect silent void. Post-war examinations of German archives dismantled the wartime rumors, showing no record of U-boat or surface raider attacks. Suspicions of mutiny, sabotage, or Captain Worley's defection similarly lacked any supporting evidence. Instead, the physical realities of the ship suggest a silent engineering disaster. Heavily overloaded with dense manganese ore and limping on a single engine, the sluggish collier encountered a severe gale off the Virginia Capes around March 9th. The overwhelming weight of the cargo, combined with reduced maneuverability, likely caused the hull to roll or break apart, sinking too fast to broadcast a distress signal. On June 1, 1918, the Navy officially declared the vessel and all 306 souls lost. Decades later, in late 1941, her sister ships Proteus and Nereus vanished under nearly identical conditions while carrying heavy ore cargoes, reinforcing the theory of structural vulnerability. The wreck of the Cyclops remains undiscovered, a real-world maritime tragedy far older and more profound than the cultural myths of the Bermuda Triangle. Subscribe to follow more historical mysteries.
The ocean keeps its secrets. Today, 3 sister ships lie in the same silent dark, proving that even steel giants still bow to the sea. This baffling mystery remains an open wound, reminding us of our limits. Subscribe for more historical mysteries.